Are you ready for us to start? I think we best. Do we still have everybody in there, Rebecca?
That's correct. There's no one in the waiting room right now.
Okay. It is 7:01, so we can go ahead and start the meeting. I'm calling this is Chairman Blanco, and I'm calling the May 27th, 2021 regular meeting of the North Bend Planning Commission meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. We'll do a roll call first. Commissioner Bovers.
Present.
Commissioner Bush.
Here.
Commissioner Greenberg.
Here.
Commissioner Moe. Commissioner Torgerson.
Here.
Commissioner Tao.
Here.
Okay, let's see here. All members are in attendance with the exception of Commissioner Moe, who is absent. And if she comes in a little bit, please let me know if you see maybe just having problems coming in. Okay, thank you. Item number 2 on our agenda is opportunity for public comment. Each person wishing to speak on items not on the agenda gets 3 minutes. Do we have members of the public wishing to speak? If so, please provide your name and address. Anyone in waiting, Rebecca? Do you see anybody? Okay. We have no one wishing to speak on items not on our agenda, so we'll move on to item number 3. Approval of our minutes from the May 13th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. Do any commissioners have any comments, clarifications, or adjustments to the minutes? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
I move that the minutes be approved.
Thank you.
Commissioner Torgerson, I second that.
Okay. We have a motion made by Commissioner Greenberg, seconded by Commissioner Torgerson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is passed by a vote of 6, including myself. Actual vote of 6 members present with 1 person, no one is opposing. So there we go. Item number 4, the development agreement for potential West North Bend Way senior housing project. Can we please have a staff report?
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
So no need for an extensive introduction here to the proposal. You guys have seen it before. We've had the public hearing at your last meeting on May 13th. We do have Misty Klink, who is representing the applicant. Misty is with Charlie Morgan Architects, so she'll be able to address questions if the Planning Commission has questions for the applicant, and otherwise I'll be happy to address questions that you have. I've updated the staff report to provide a brief summary of the comment that was received at the public hearing, and I've attached those written comments to the report. So you've got all of that with you. There was a lot of good comments, as you heard, raising concerns about stormwater, flooding, groundwater, critical area impacts. And again, those are really important issues that staff will be very carefully evaluating and considering through the development review process once an application has been submitted. I did provide some minor updates to the development agreement based on some of the public comment that was received. And those updates in your packet are shown in red line or track changes format. And those relate to some provisions in the city's regulations that the DA development agreement, the DA, authorizes the application to vest to. And then also specifically citing an RCW that authorizes the city to impose new or different regulations to the extent that that might be necessary to address matters of public safety and health. Those were just some comments that were received that we thought were really easy to address in the development agreement itself. I want to note that we're asking that the Planning Commission not make your recommendation tonight on the development agreement. And that is so that staff can complete the SEPA determination, the State Environmental Policy Act determination, on that development agreement and to provide that to you ahead of making your recommendation to the city council. So because of the timing necessary to post the SEPA, put it in the paper, send out notice to the property owners adjacent, and then also because we've got some canceled meetings coming up, that's not going to come back to you until your second meeting in July. But that'll give us time to prepare that SEPA determination and notify it properly. So we did receive comments, as you know, by some members of the public suggesting that the SEPA determination should evaluate the full scope of the project, including some concerns that they raised about flooding, hydrology, stormwater, and critical areas. However, there's not sufficient information at this point to provide that full SEPA analysis of the proposal. And so instead, what we're intending is that this SEPA determination is just on the development agreement itself. So the topic about the height in exchange for the affordable housing that the developer is offering to provide in 10% of the units. And then so what that will serve as is the first phase of the SEPA that will be ultimately for the project. So full SEPA on the project would occur later with the submittal of those required analyses that would accompany a complete application. So the state's regulations in the Washington Administrative Code specifically authorizes, contemplates that type of phased SEPA approach in a circumstance such as this. So there is a specification in WAC 9711-060 that phased SEPA review is appropriate when there's a sequence of review on a project split from a non-project document, which is exactly what this development agreement is, to a document of a narrower scope, such as a site-specific analysis. So that approach really makes sense. It wouldn't be reasonable to ask the applicant to spend several tens of thousands of dollars on the extensive environmental analyses that would be required to accompany a complete application. So that would be like your storm analysis for conformance to the stormwater regulations, critical areas report, a floodplain analysis demonstrating full conformance to the floodplain regulations. That's a lot of investment. And so the question at hand is just whether or not the city would approve of the additional 8 feet of height on the building. And so we can compartmentalize that question, look at the SEPA impacts of the 8 additional feet in exchange for the affordable housing, and address the rest of the SEPA once that's been answered, and then the applicant can go back and do those analyses. So that's their very next step in the process, and we certainly expect that all of those analyses will be carefully vetted by the applicant, and they'll have to demonstrate that when they submit their application through the course of review. But again, we're just planning to do the SEPA determination on the development agreements, the topic, the height, and we'll bring that back to you then once that has been prepared. So you've had an introduction to the proposal previously. You've received the comment from the public hearing at your last meeting, and you've got the staff report. So let me turn it back to you, and I'll be happy to address questions that you have for me regarding our process and our regulations, or Misty is available and can address questions that you might have for the applicant.
Hey, Chair Blanco, this is Commissioner Tao. I have a question for staff.
Okay,
Hey, Mike, so in your comments, a couple of times you mentioned that the SEPA review will be looking at the building height in exchange for the affordable housing. But it seems like those are really two separate topics to be addressed. The SEPA review isn't looking at the bargain necessarily.
No, it's not necessarily about the bargain.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that point. And then regarding the building height and the analysis that staff is going to perform, what factors will the staff be considering in making it or in advising whether raising the building heights by 8 feet is or isn't significant?
Yeah, so that's where it comes back to, and some of this is in the staff report. What are the impacts relative to the benefits of that and is the ultimate decision in the public interest. And so the staff recommendation on this is still yes. And SEPA will have to be performed, but at least in terms of the staff report and the impacts, the 8 feet of additional height, staff believes is made up for in excess by the benefit of the affordable housing, the benefit of providing the senior housing, which we are deficient in North Bend right now, and the benefit to the downtown area with additional commerce, support for those businesses, people within walking distance of the downtown and goods and services, and the ability to relate to the park and ride, a number of additional benefits that the project then provides for those additional 8 feet of building height.
So I guess I'm still a little unclear then what this SEPA process from a staff analysis standpoint. I mean, it sounds like staff has already determined and therefore is recommending adopting this development agreement, which will allow for the 8 feet of building height.
Mhm.
What will the actual SEPA process from a staff perspective, what is it that you'll be considering? Or
So-
are you just allowing a certain amount of time to lapse?
So there's an additional public comment process. So just as we've had a public hearing on this, there will be a public comment once that SEPA is determined. And that hopefully the comment then is more focused specific to that SEPA decision. In the public hearing, we had a lot of comment on the project as a whole. So the SEPA will try to focus then, here's the issue that's being considered by the city, this additional height. These are the specific potential impacts, view shed, whatever those things may be, specific to that particular decision. And then
So should because the building height is a design feature, it's got engineering considerations that go into the building height and the design. A number of comments from the public seem to be related to, let's say, for example, water runoff or stormwater, et cetera, view corridors, kind of outcomes of a higher building height. And yet it sounds like staff's position is to deal with those aspects when the project application gets submitted. And yet it seems like some of these comments do in fact relate to the question of whether the building heights should be increased for this project. So I guess I'm concerned that we wouldn't use the SEPA process to assess the kind of technical aspects of some of the comments that we've received from the public.
So the development or the developer is not seeking deviation from anything other than the building height, and to ask for a 50% reduction on the transportation impact fees for the affordable housing units specifically. So there's no need for analysis of the stormwater regulations or the critical area regulations, because they will provide full compliance to those regulations as required by our code. So the only thing that we're looking at would be the building height and what are the impacts relative to the building height. So if there's comments that we received specific to the building height, we do want to consider those in that SEPA determination. And we maybe provide some findings within that SEPA determination that describe how the city has responded to those impacts or those concerns that were raised.
Okay, thanks.
Any other commissioners, Mr. Greenberg, Commissioner Greenberg?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have one question and then I'll follow that up with a couple of comments. Earlier today, I emailed Mike with a question that I thought might be interesting for all the commissioners to hear. And that question, so I was looking at the zoning map earlier today, and I noticed that the right of way in front of this property, North Bend Way, the area that would be vacated and become part of this property, didn't appear to have any zoning attached to it. So my question was whether a comprehensive plan amendment and or rezone would be necessary. And Mike's answer was,
Yeah, so, and this is just my informal answer. I'll certainly run that by legal, but we don't zone our rights of way. And the way that we've addressed, at least the partial street vacations that I've been addressed in the past, when you address a street vacation, the area that is added to the private property from what was previously right of way just joins that property. And so the zoning then becomes whatever that zoning is for the parent property. So in this case, it's zoned downtown commercial, or the parent property is. So the portion of the right of way that's vacated to add to that property also becomes downtown commercial.
okay, thank you. Yeah, different cities do it different ways. So that's why I was asking the question.
Okay.
Couple of concerns I have about the project. I like the idea of the project. I like the concept of having some mixed use and senior housing and affordable housing along with that. I do have two concerns. The first one is dealing with building height. Earlier this year, we spent a meeting or more talking about building height in the downtown commercial zone. And really, I think thoroughly debated whether building heights outside of the historic district should be increased. I think, as I recall, I think staff proposal was to increase them. I might be confused on that, but the bottom line is the Planning Commission did recommend to City Council, and I noticed that they're set to adopt this next week, that building height not change in the downtown commercial zone. So it kind of rubs me the wrong way that now we're being asked to consider a height increase on a specific piece of property when we literally just talked about downtown commercial height several months ago. So that's just my opinion. My other concern is that I've said this before with development agreements. I'm generally opposed to how we're using development agreements. I think that there could be some code changes that would make projects more palatable and would help them pencil out better. One is, well, height increase would be one. And I think that was mentioned in an early presentation on this project, that another option would have been a zoning code amendment where we could have considered a smaller area for a height increase. But then also the waiver of impact fees. I guess I'm opposed to use of a development agreement for that purpose also, because state law allows a fairly simple procedure. It would be a code amendment to allow impact fee waivers for affordable housing. There are some standards that would need to be met, that sort of thing. But this is a relatively new provision in state law. It was put in, I'm going to guess, in the past 4 years, maybe. And I would encourage the city to take advantage of that provision and just simply go ahead and adopt the impact fee waiver for affordable housing. And it doesn't have to be all impact fees. You can say we're going to do it for transportation, but not for parks and that sort of thing. But those are my two concerns about the project.
Oops. Thank you, Commissioner Greenberg. Anybody, any other commissioner has comments? Okay, hearing none. We're not going to deliberate tonight, is my understanding.
You can deliberate. We're just not seeking your recommendation.
Okay.
So I definitely want to hear any direction back from you or questions or things that you'd like us to address in either the development agreement or the staff report.
Commissioner Torgerson? Commissioner Bush, anything you would like to add to it? I'm not hearing any. Nope.
This is Commissioner Torgerson.
Okay,
I feel like we kind of need to wait until the SEPA report comes back to really, comment on this. And, I feel like it's the cart before the horse for providing feedback until we get the SEPA report back.
So just so you know, the SEPA is not going to be an extensive analysis. We will lay out some findings that maybe respond to some comments and describe the process of the phased SEPA review, but there's not going to be an extensive analysis of height and impacts of height. It's a decision point of, is this creating significant adverse impacts that cannot be mitigated through the development agreement or through the conformance to the code. So just as a heads up, and if there's additional analysis you want me to provide regarding height, we can provide that to you. But the SEPA determination is just a determination. It's not a full analysis.
I had a quick question for Commissioner Greenberg, based on your comments. I'm sitting here thinking about that. In your experience, how do you feel about the thinking of height in a specific location? I know that from my experience, at least on the commission, you don't try to zone for a specific lot, that type of thing. But based on, I had the same thought when we first saw when this first came up, is that we just went through this, right? Height was a major thing that we talked about and saying, trying not to go tall. That was the idea that we got from the public, and we kind of went that direction, like you said. But how do you feel about looking at specific locations like this?
That's the very purpose of a development agreement, is it allows you to consider a package. And that's very often the case with the code, that the code makes sense in 90% of the situation, but then maybe there's a circumstance in which it doesn't make sense, or that there's benefits that allow you to consider, or make you want to consider something alternative, that in the interest of the public, it would make sense to provide that deviation. And so that's why we have the development agreement process, and why there's also a public process to it, just like there would be with a code amendment. You're considering, is this in the public interest? And the public weighs in, and you make your recommendation to council, just like you would with a development agreement. So it's considering the package as a whole.
Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a big fan of DAs either. I like the idea of changing the code to match and doing it as a whole, so that you're not being specific to the project. But specifically to the height question, I feel like height is an important thing to think of in a case-by-case basis as you go along, because we all understand the meaning of building height, especially in the case of North Bend. We all understand that the idea is to keep a view of the mountains and the view of the rest of the city. For me, I do agree with looking at a specific site when you talk about height, because when you look at this site, you're not blocking a lot of views in this specific location. So I think that it does go not opposite to what we talked about in terms of not wanting to increase the height before, but it definitely is a case-by-case situation where height isn't as big of an issue here, in my opinion, as it would be somewhere further east into town where you are blocking the view of Mount Si. If you think about this site specifically, to me, you're not blocking a whole lot by going taller here. So I more or less the question for Commissioner Greenberg in the sense of his comment. I agree with him. I just wanted to see if you had an opinion on that.
Yeah, I do agree with what staff said about, development agreements are designed to be used with specific sites. Sometime there is a minimum area to be used. Some cities say you have to have 50 acres or whatever it might be, which is not feasible here. I guess the other way I would look at it is, if we have the wrong height limit, we should change the code and put in the right criteria. I mean, we started down that path with form-based codes, if you remember, you know, and in fact, some of what's being adopted under form-based codes, we're saying you can have a 35-foot height limit if you do X, Y, and Z, or if the building's within a certain number of feet from a property line, then you have to have a step back. So in those cases, and I know that's existing height, but there's still graphics in the proposed form-based code that show the original graphics where we were considering a 45-foot height. So that would be my approach. I think that's more appropriate personally. I'm not saying from a legal standpoint, I'm just saying, you know, that's my opinion. I think there are other ways of doing this. And maybe it's, you know, I agree we shouldn't be rezoning, you know, creating a 45-foot height limit for one parcel of land. I think that's inappropriate too. But maybe, you know, the area west of, is it Sydney Avenue there? Sydney Avenue? Between Sydney Avenue and the river, maybe we should look at different height limits for that. I don't know. But I just think there's a different way of getting there, and this is not the best way.
And if I, you know, if you don't mind my comments to put into this as well, you know, the thing about a development agreement, you know, it's not just an application to variance in the code. In order to have a development agreement, there has to be a public benefit. That's the reason we have this, the code written the way it is, so that we can consider a deviation from our code for a public benefit, whether that public benefit is an economic public benefit, whether it's in this case affordable housing that we would get, because you know, if we change the height limit on this, there would be no reason for them to give us the affordable housing units. And so using this tool gets us closer to those needs and those public benefits in exchange for something that they're getting, because to be fair, the state and the city does not have enough funding to supplement affordable housing. So using the development agreement tool to give them the extra height and in exchange for affordable housing gets us closer to those affordable housing needs and therefore a community benefit. So I've honestly, in my career, we've always done development agreements for affordable housing, even if they weren't looking for any kind of additional fees or anything like that. Usually I do see development agreements. Most of the development agreements I've seen over my career are dealing with impact fees. So that is something, whether it's because of an affordable housing or whether it's just such a big project that they want to pay the fees over time, or they do some sort of, you know, other, I don't know, I don't know, Washington, you know, tax sharing agreements kind of thing, as I've seen development agreements used for. So it definitely, there has to be a public benefit, which is why this is a great tool to use in these kind of situations where, you know, we need something, they want something, and we can make it all work through a development agreement instead of just saying, I'm sorry, the height doesn't allow it. You have to go through an entire code change, which may or may not, maybe spot zoning if it's not, in this case, luckily it's right next to a similar height. But if it wasn't, it would be almost an impossible ask without getting a whole lot of properties involved. So being able, like Mike said, looking at it as a project, what do they need to make their project pencil? What do we need for the city? Is exactly a great tool that this development agreement is used for, especially in this situation where we're getting affordable housing out of it.
But that speaks exactly to what my problem with DAs is my problem with DAs is the making something specific to the developer, the city trying to get something out of a development versus something that's everyone's on the same playing field. So you still get that public benefit with a code change. You may not get the housing, but you can get the results that you're getting out of that code change as well. Like Commissioner Greenberg was saying, if you do the transportation impact fees being waived, that can still happen through the code change and affect everyone and not just the specific developer.
Yeah, but they wouldn't give us affordable housing if we changed the code to allow them the height. They wouldn't need the fee waivers. You know, nothing against them. Maybe they would, but you know, only usually nonprofits build the affordable housing without any kind of either financial assistance or give in some other way.
Well, I don't know if we want to debate development agreements as a
Right.
whole right now, but I do want to respond to something you said. I've written code in the past where, it wasn't height, it was number of housing units or density. It was density. And the developer, right in the code, we said your density is 24 units per acre, and you can go up to 30 units per acre if a certain percentage of those are affordable. And for that affordable housing, we will waive the following impact fees. Boom. So it wasn't a requirement to do it. It's written in there. So in this context, a code amendment that says in the downtown commercial zone, okay, so we're not looking at one property, or maybe it's a sub area of the downtown commercial zone where we think taller heights aren't going to be an issue. You can have the taller height if you provide us X percent affordable housing. We'll waive the impact fee for that affordable housing. And we may even, you have to dedicate a trail or do whatever we want. We can put that right in the code. That's what I'm saying. I think that's, if you were coming to us with that kind of a proposal, then I would support that. I can't support this one. Now, on the other hand, I'm not going to be here for the vote, so don't,
But then you'd also
getting
remove
it out now.
You'd also remove then the public hearing process. You wouldn't have the neighbors being able to come out because it would just be a staff level approval because they'd be missing the code. That's the other benefit of these, something that's unique. We're notifying people, they have a chance to come and give their opinion, and it becomes more of a discretionary discussion of, does this make sense? I understand you don't like the idea of, does it make sense for this property? You'd rather see it fair across the board. But it does expand the public, by having a public hearing, it expands that, noticing that, for people to come and speak on it instead of a staff level approval. But I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, and you can require a public hearing. I mean, you say this requires a public hearing before the hearing examiner, or the planning commission, or the city council, or whoever you want to have a public hearing. It's part of the requirement. You can write it right into the code, so it applies to more than just one piece of property. And maybe we'd see more of these kinds of projects if we did that, and not require somebody to jump through development agreement hoops, which in my opinion is very what's the word I'm looking for? It's very uncertain.
So I do want to come back to something that, aside from the affordable housing, that the Planning Commission should consider in this case. And if it's not through the development agreement, they should consider through a code amendment. And that's the financial viability of this project. So this is providing market rate senior housing, which we are in severe deficient supply of in North Bend. And as a part of your comp plan goals, you want to provide a balanced community that provides housing for all different aspects of life. And so if this project cannot pencil out under the height limit that we have, it's not likely to pencil out in other areas of town either. And so that's something important to consider with your height limits with a project such as this. So either through the development agreement or a code amendment process, that there's a strong relationship to project viability for a larger project such as this and height limits.
So if the development agreement, like, if the planning commission, like, hypothetically, if it were to go through, could there be like a monitoring or an adaptive management piece to this where we could track the projects that were permitted through the DA process to see whether or not they met the intended outcomes and like were they successful, since we're doing so many of them?
So they are required to comply with all provisions of the development agreement and all provisions of the code that apply to the property. So that's just done through the permitting process. So as a project goes through the permitting, As an example, we're finishing up the permitting right now on the ball fields project, the Snoqualmie Valley Athletic Center. And that was also approved through a development agreement, which authorized them to do a first phase of the project ahead of sewer. But there's a lot of conditions associated with that development agreement that they are having to meet. And that's just a part of our review process as we review the project, that we put those into specific discrete project milestones to make sure that we're going back and meeting those development agreement provisions as well as the code provisions that apply.
Anyone else? Hearing none. I would just like to comment and say that this has been some very healthy discussion. I go back and forth on this. I see a lot of perspective from each comment, and I'm actually happy that we are waiting until July to do this. I'm sorry Scott won't be there to vote on this, but it gives us some time to ponder, and I do appreciate that. So that's just my thoughts. Anyone else have any more they would like to add? Okay, hearing none. We will then move on to, part 4B, I'm going to say, is that on July 22nd, we will continue this discussion and make a recommendation, hopefully, to send it on to council then after this SEPA has come back. Number 5 is on our agenda is amendments to North Bend Municipal Code 18.22, temporary uses. Can we please have the staff report?
Yes, sorry, I was having technical difficulties with my notes here. Let me get that one open back up. So as we introduced at the last meeting, we are proposing to amend Chapter 18.22, which is temporary uses. The first part of the amendment was introduced at the last meeting discussing construction storage yards, where a government agency or utility has the need sometimes to have a construction storage yard and they are unable to do that at the site that they're constructing. You know, sometimes there's not enough room for WashDOT on the side of the freeway, or if a utility is doing transmission lines, they're sometimes doing it through private property or through public property that, again, they don't own, so they have an easement and aren't able to do the storage there. And those bigger projects, especially when they're government or utilities, are longer term usually than what our temporary use code currently allows for at 45 days. So this code adds that allowance is what we're calling a public TUP. Additionally, we've been reached out from the fire department, who we have a representative here to help speak to what they're planning on doing with doing a training facility. And we realize that on a temporary basis, and we realize our temporary use code also does not cover that kind of use. If we have a public safety agency of any kind, or whether it's a utility and their public safety people, or the fire department or the police department, if they need to temporarily use a site, again, private property that they want to rent out to set up a training facility, that we don't have a code to allow them to do that, that they would have to basically buy their own property and do all of the required improvements in order to do something like that, even if they only needed it for 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. So we added this new section in there from our last introduction that we're proposing to add, which would allow for temporary training facilities for, again, just utility and government agencies. And that would include, any kind of temporary storage they might need. Sometimes they use storage containers as part of their training, and to train staff in realistic conditions. That's all I have. We did make a mistake in our noticing of this public hearing. We accidentally put the date as the 20th instead of the 27th. So we are also not going to deliberate or make a recommendation today and continue the public hearing to our next meeting on the 10th, so that we re-advertised it, so that the additional people who may have missed the date or misunderstood it, or have a chance to come to the meeting, the public, and come and speak under the public hearing. And that's all I have. And if you have any questions for Mr. Clark. He's here to answer your questions about what they're looking to do with their training.
Does the commission have any questions now that we need? Thank you, Rebecca. Hearing none, we'll open the public hearing at, let me see here, I have 7:41.
This is Commissioner Torgerson. I was just wondering if Mr. Clark could give us a summary of what his plans are in relating to the temporary uses.
Maybe before we go there, unless that's clarification for the purpose of the public hearing, we could complete the public hearing and then come back to questions.
We're not going to close the public hearing either way because we got to leave it open for the next meeting. So normally that would make sense, but because we're leaving it open at this point moving forward, it's not really, we can take any public comment at any time.
Hi, you okay with me talking, Madam Chair? All right, thanks. I'll take your smile as a yes. So thank you, commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. But yeah, we met with city staff a few weeks ago along with the developer, and there is, we have at Eastside Fire and Rescue, and first of all, I'm sorry, I'm the fire chief with Eastside Fire and Rescue, and as you know, we serve North Bend and District 38, the surrounding area there, as well as Issaquah-Sammamish. So we have been looking for training sites on a regular basis. As you're aware, land is very hard to come by in our region of the woods here. And what we are looking at is we have a need for training. And usually we're looking for, say, a 2 or 3 acre site. And there is a site in North Bend that we have been talking with a local developer who does not have immediate plans for it. And they are willing to consider at least preliminarily, allowing us use of a couple of acres. And what that would entail for us is we would put some kind of modular classroom on it. And then there is modular training apparatus that are built out of shipping containers that we can configure in lots of configurations to copy what the inside of a house would be or an apartment complex. And what we would do is bring fire companies down there, engines and ladders, to simulate training. We would not burn in this training atmosphere. We would black it out with closing the doors, and we would use what we call cold smoke, which is environmentally friendly, safe smoke to use. And it's not a thick, heavy smoke that crowds through everything, but it would just allow us an area to do the training. Our ultimate goal is to find a permanent site. We have been looking for a few years to find a permanent site and the proper partners, and that's going to take time. So what we're looking for is temporary use of a site if we can find the proper place and the right amendment. And this type of language that's in the document before you would allow us the ability, if we do come to an agreement and a conclusion with the developer, to be able to do something like this within the city of North Bend. And we would certainly appreciate that opportunity because, like I said, this is a very difficult thing for us to locate. It's not something we're looking to do permanently. If we did that, of course, and we were lucky enough to find land in North Bend, we would go through the normal permitting and planning process to build a proper permanent structure, but that's not what our intentions are at this time.
Chair, you're muted still.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. Anyone else wishing to speak? If you do, please give us your name and address. Well, hearing none, we won't close our public meeting. We're going to leave this one open as stated until June 10th. And we will continue it then. Is that correct, Rebecca? We get to continue it?
That's correct.
Okay, continue then. Again, I'll swing by the commissioners, our commissioners, if you have any questions at all. No? Okay. Hearing none, we will move on to the temporary. Yeah, that's it on our agenda here. We are going to leave this one open. Anybody have anything for the good of the order before we adjourn? guys are pretty quiet here tonight. Okay, hearing none.
Everyone's ready for the long weekend.
Everybody wants to get out of town. I got it. Okay, we will, we don't need a motion, so we will adjourn our planning commission meeting. I have 7:46 p.m. Everybody have a safe weekend and fun.
Bye.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful
Thanks.
weekend.
Thank you.
Everyone, bye.